back on air.
Hello, and great to have your company once again on this latest episode of Once Upon a Time in the Ashes. For those new to the show, it's the podcast that takes a sideways look at Ashes cricket through the eyes of the one Ashes Test wonders. During the 1990s, 7 cricketers played their one and only Ashes Test, 3 from England and 4 from Australia. We've already spoken with Steve Watkin, who played in 1993, and Peter McIntyre and Joe Angel, who played in 1995. Their stories are waiting for you wherever you get your podcasts. And that brings us to the 1997 Ashes in England, the closest series of the decade, with England managing to win 2 tests, to Australia's 3. After 3 tests, it was still all to play for. England winning the first test at Edgbaston, which included that memorable double century from Nasser Hussain. The second test at Lord's was drawn, largely due to rain, and then Australia dominated the third test at Old Trafford to level the series. England made one change for the fourth test, the selectors plumping for the swing bowling option of Mike Smith over the experienced Andy Caddick, who ended up with 24 wickets during the series. It was a decision not without controversy, as we'll find out right now from today's guest, the Gloucestershire stalwart, Mike Smith. Let's bring him into the attack. Mike Smith was a left-arm swing bowler for Gloucestershire in England. He took 533 first-class wickets at 24.68, taking 5 wickets in an innings on 22 occasions and 10 in a match on 5 occasions. He played his one test for England in the 4th test of the 1997 Ashes at Headingley. Mike, welcome to Once Upon a Time in the Ashes.
No, thank you very much. Nice to be here.
Yeah, it's great to have you on the show. And I guess let's start at the beginning. You were born in Yorkshire. Did you grow up watching and supporting the White Rose?
Yes and no, really. Yeah, I mean, I did grow up near Leeds. And a lot of my kind of early cricket was kind of following my dad around, who played local league cricket, played for 2 or 3 teams in the Leeds, Bradford, Wakefield kind of area. But he wasn't a huge fan of Yorkshire cricket at that time. I think it was, they had all sorts of trouble with Jeff Boycott and 1 or 2 others, didn't they? And there was a lot of infighting at the time. So he wasn't a member of Yorkshire cricket. I think he would have liked to have been, but the infighting kind of put him off a little bit. So we didn't go and watch Yorkshire very often.
Obviously, this is a Ashes-focused podcast. What are your first memories of Ashes cricket during that time? You know, watching on TV, or did you go to any games in Yorkshire?
Yeah, well, funnily enough, you know, I'm sure you hear a lot of people say that they were at Headingley 81. I actually was at Headingley 81 on the last day. I didn't see Beefy's runs on the 4th day, but it was school holidays and we didn't have much else to do, so we went to Headingley on the 5th day, and there wasn't a huge crowd there, maybe a few thousand at most, because it seemed obvious that Australia were going to win and it would be over by lunchtime. Obviously it didn't work out that way, so my mum took us down and I went with my brothers to watch the last day of that, you know, when Bob Willis got all his wickets and bowled unbelievably. And I remember going to the toilet, and then the first wicket went, and my brothers kept saying, go to the toilet again, go to the toilet again. I kept going back to the toilet, and every time I went to the toilet, a wicket fell. So, you know, that was just their kind of way of trying to get England to win the match. But yeah, I do remember the last few wickets going and running onto the field at the end. I mean, it was a phenomenal day. I think I was probably, how old was I then? Maybe 14.
Before we get to Gloucestershire and obviously your long career with them, a one county man as you were, just going to briefly talk about the combined universities, because obviously you played for them, didn't you, between 88 and 90, I think it was, playing alongside the likes of Nasser Hussain and Michael Atherton as your captain. So how was that whole experience?
That was good. I mean, I had a long kind of history with Michael Atherton because, you know, from under 13 level through to under 18 level, I was always captain of Yorkshire schoolboys, and Michael was always captain of Lancashire. So we played against each other from the ages of 12, 13, all the way through. And we played England schools together as well. I think he was captain of that team. So I saw an awful lot of him whilst I was growing up. And for him to be captain of the combined universities, just went with it. So yeah, it was great.
I mean, that is outstanding, isn't it? You think you played schoolboys against him as a captain, combined universities. Who'd have thought at that point that one day he would be your England captain?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, England schools as well. So, we did play with or against each other several times a year from the age of 13 onwards. And he was a brilliant player, even back in those days. I remember one game, I think it was under 15 Yorkshire against Lancashire, and his reputation was fantastic even then. And I think it was at the Yorkshire Bank Cricket Ground. They won the toss and battered. And there was a huge crowd there, people that were in with deck chairs and cool boxes with sandwiches and beers and whatever. And the whole of the ground was covered in people. It was 3 or 4 deep all the way around the boundary edge for an under-15 match. And I thought this was a bit odd, but it was because they'd all come to watch Mike Atherton get an inevitable 100 against Yorkshire schoolboys. So it was a big fixture anyway, but to have somebody like him playing really, it swelled the crowd.
Of course, back then, the combined university played in the B&H Cup, didn't they? So you got the experience of playing against the county sides.
Yeah, absolutely. And we beat 1 or 2 of them, actually. I mean, I think I played in 88 and 90. I was in Germany because I did French and German at university, and I was placed in Germany in 89. So I missed that year when they did win quite a few games, actually. They beat Worcester. In fact, the first ever game I played for combined universities was against Gloucestershire at Bristol. Tony Wright and Andy Caddick opened the batting. Martin Spate got a brilliant 80-odd for the universities in that game. Brilliant innings. Remarkable. But, despite him getting sort of 70 or 80, we still lost that game, actually.
Yeah, no, I noticed that was your first game. And I thought, well, that's strange. It was against Gloucestershire because Mark Lane was playing, of course, who had become your captain. Right. David Graveney was captain at that time. I think Bill Athy was playing, made 82. Right. So...
Yeah, no, it was great fun, actually, because we had no expectations.
No, of course.
Whatsoever that we were going to beat anybody. Steve Ward played in one of those games as well against us, I think.
Yeah.
And for Somerset. And did he get Mike Atherton out? I think he got Atherton out with a slower ball. He kind of, that back of the hand slower ball, it was the first time I've ever seen it. I know he wasn't quick, Steve Ward, but he did have a brilliant slower ball. And I think Atherton ended up chipping it to cover.
How does the opportunity with Gloucestershire arise?
I played for the NAYC team against Sri Lanka one summer, Sri Lanka, under 19s. And a guy called Graham Wiltshire, he was the manager of that team, and he was also the coach at Gloucestershire. And he said, "Have you got a county interested in you?" I said, "No, I haven't." He said, "Well, why don't you come and play at Gloucestershire in our second team for a few games?" Okay. And so that's how it all started at Gloucestershire.
Yeah, and what do you remember of your early days? Do you remember your first-class debut for Gloucestershire?
Yeah, I think that was at Worcester. And I mean, again, that was 91, my first-class debut. I mean, at that stage, you just coming to the end of the old kind of era, before things got serious and you had to get fit. And Sky Sports came in the mid-90s. And my first few seasons were actually curtailed due to my own lack of fitness. I never really got past the Cheltenham Festival in any of the first few seasons. I mean, Cheltenham Festival sort of July-ish. I was done by then, either injured or knackered. But my first class debut was at Worcester, and you had Graham Hick and Tom Moody and Bill Neal, Tim Curtis, David Leatherdale. I mean, again, just guys that I just felt were way too good for me. I'll give it a go. I said, I'll give it a go, but I didn't get a wicket in that. In fact, I didn't get a wicket in the next game, which was against Hampshire, I think, at Bristol. It took me 50 overs, actually, to get a first-class wicket. I remember that. Because I was thinking, getting up to 45, 50 overs, I'm never going to get a wicket in first-class cricket. But eventually I did get one. I think it was against Yorkshire.
I was going to say, appropriate enough, I think it was against Yorkshire at Sheffield, wasn't it?
It was, Ashley Metcalf. Bowled behind his legs first over, my first over anyway. I'm not sure it was first over of the game, but certainly my first over. And then I was off the mark at Sheffield. Then we played the Sunday game at Sheffield, and I got Richard Richardson out, which I think gave me a lot of confidence. It was a huge surprise to me that I could nick off somebody like that. I think that's where the confidence actually started to grow a little bit.
Yeah, sure. Well, what about the other players in the team then? You got some big characters in that Gloucestershire team when you when you're starting out. I mean, the likes of Jack Russell, Bill Athy, I mentioned earlier, David Lawrence, Sid Lawrence. What was it like stepping into a dressing room with those guys?
Yeah, I mean, huge characters. Bill Athy, I mean, Jeremy, Lloyd, who's recently passed away, unfortunately. These guys were, proper characters and proper players. Courtney Walsh as well. Mark Elaine was just making his way. It was good to be in the dressing room with those kind of guys. I mean, I owe quite a lot to Bill Athy, actually, because I was bowling at him in the nets and he noticed I wasn't fit enough. And he said, you're not going to make anything unless you change things, because, you are very predictable, very samey, you're not fit enough. Harsh words, but, tough love from Bill, to be fair. He knew what it took to be good. He was very fit himself and very determined, very physically, very strong as well. So, he gave me the kick up the backside that I needed, I think.
Yeah, and you took that on board, did you? Then you embark on a fitness regime, or how did you do that?
Yeah, I mean, after 2 or 3 years at Gloucestershire, I was having a serious think about whether I was going to carry on, because I was getting 20, 25 wickets a year, as I say, done by July. Andy Caddick, who was coach sort of mid-90s, he sent me down to see a couple of guys at Bristol University one winter and basically said to them, make me and a couple of others, Tim Hancock and Bobby Dawson, these guys aren't fit enough, get them fit. And then we'll see what they can do. Yeah. So I did take that seriously. It was a kind of a make or break for me. I decided, if you are going to make a proper go of this, you do have to be a bit fitter than you are. So, yeah, they got me fit at Bristol University that winter. And after that, my results, amazingly, my results improved.
Yeah, I was going to say from, about 95, you really started hitting your straps, didn't you, and taking a lot of wickets. Just quickly before I come to that, you mentioned the winters then. I'm always curious to know, what did you do during the winters in your early days?
Well, various things. I mean, we did only get paid from April to September. You could choose to have that spread over 12 months, but when it wasn't very much, there was not very much point in that. So you did have to find a job. 2 winters I worked at Parcel Force in Bristol, packing lorries full of parcels and goods. I mean, that was, that got me stronger to a certain extent. I didn't have to go to the gym after that 5 days a week.
And then, as we just alluded to, probably the mid-90s is when you really start to become, the performer that we all know, if you like, for Gloucestershire. That you took 59 wickets at 21 in 95, 60 at 26 in 96. So, do you suddenly start feeling you're a better cricketer? And what do you put that down to? Is it the fitness training, or is it just the experience of bowling all these overs? What do you put it down to?
I think mainly down to the fitness. I mean, my first decent year was 95, and I think I got 50 odd wickets in that year. And I didn't play. I don't think I played half of July, August, or September, because I got injured against the West Indies, because I was doing well and I was becoming to get on the England radar. And we played the West Indies in one of their warm-up games for the Test series. Jack was captain. He said, "Do you want to play?" I said, "Well, I'm a bit knackered." Because I'd bowled a lot of overs that year already. And he said, "I could probably do with a few days off." And he said, "You're on the England radar, play. Play. I'll bowl you 10 overs and that's it. Get a couple of wickets. Keep the momentum going." So I agreed kind of on that basis. I got into my 11th over, would you believe? I had got 2 or 3 wickets. I got into my 11th over and then pulled my intercostal. Yeah. So I said to Jack, "I thought you were going to, just bowl me 10 overs." Oh, bother kind of thing.
You were on a roll, yeah. I couldn't resist.
I was on a roll, yeah, exactly. So that was me for the rest of that season. But I did get picked for England A to go to Pakistan that winter, despite having missed half the season.
Yeah, and that was injury hit as well, with this rib injury, I think it was.
Again, I'd never really... They picked me and I wasn't really over the rib injury. I'm not sure I would have played much over there anyway. Dean Headley went, Ed Giddins, Craig White. I think that those were the 3 that Nasser was captain. Nasser had in mind to play most of the games. I did play one day game. I think I got 1 wicket caught on the boundary. But then 6 weeks into the trip, it was clear that I wasn't going to play much, so came home.
Well, you clearly shrugged off that injury because, as I said, the following season you took 60 wickets. But if we then fast forward to 97, which is obviously a key season in your career, I mean, that was statistically anyway your best season, wasn't it? 78 wickets at 16 in the county championship. Would you say that was your best season as a bowler?
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it was a wettish start to the summer, 97. I mean, right up until kind of late May, the wickets were helpful to me, put it that way. And the ball was swinging, I was over the side injury, got a lot fitter and stronger. Yeah, and loving life, really. Probably that's the best season I had. I think what led up to the test match, we went to Yorkshire. We played a championship game at Yorkshire at Headingley, and I got 10 wickets in that match. So that was probably helped me get picked for the Headingley test match.
Yeah, I noticed that game. And then your first taste against the Australians, obviously we'll come to your Ashes test in a minute, but you did play them for Gloucestershire, didn't you, at the start of the season? And you had Mark Taylor caught behind by Jack Russell off the fourth ball or something like that very early on. So again, is that a big moment in your career?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I don't know whether you remember, but Mark Taylor was on a terrible run of form. But, he literally couldn't get a run. And this was, this match against us was kind of not last chance saloon, but if he didn't get runs in this game, the knives really would have been out. And it was that match. I think somebody presented him as he got off the bus. Do you remember? Somebody presented him with a bat that was about 4 feet wide.
Yes.
But that didn't go down well. And then, lo and behold, he nicked off in the first over. But I think he got run second in his. He didn't face the first ball. He let Matthew Elliott do that, I think, second time round. Yeah. In the second innings, he didn't want to face, which, he got some stick for. Yeah.
You mentioned Steve Waugh earlier. You also bowled him that day for 92, denying him 100.
Yeah, that's nice, isn't it? Yeah. I mean, I was a bit annoyed with him afterwards because he'd said in the paper that we had a modest attack or something like that. But still bowled him, which, what else do you want me to do? I was happy with that.
And you also took the wicket of Matthew Elliott, a wicket you'd have dearly liked later in the summer, I'm sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I bowled pretty well. I think I got two for in both.
Two in both innings, yeah.
Yeah. It wasn't as one-sided affair as Steve Waugh made out. I think we held our own.
Definitely. Okay, well, let's get into these Ashes. So we'll come to the fourth test in which you played in a moment. What about the series up to that point? Had you been following the first three tests quite keenly?
Yeah, I remember Nasser getting his double 100 at Edgbaston, and it was very kind of evenly matched. I mean, they were billed, before they came, they were billed as the best side ever to come to these shores, weren't they? With Waugh, Steve Waugh, Mark Waugh, Glenn McGrath, Pontin.
Pretty good.
Yeah, I mean, it's a decent start, not to mention Healy and Rifle and Gillespie and Blewett. Yeah, I mean, these are household names, aren't they? It was a fantastic team. And then I was picked in the squad for the Old Trafford match, which was the third test. And I was 12th man. I was quite not pleased. That's the wrong word, but Old Trafford's just not one of my grounds. Some grounds you just feel as if you got good memories, you got wickets or runs or whatever there. You had good days there. I mean, if you were to ask me to list your least favourite ground in terms of how you've performed there, Old Trafford is right at the top for me. I mean, I hardly ever got a wicket there. So, if they'd looked at that, I don't know whether they'd looked at those stats. Undoubtedly, the right decision to make me 12th man in that match.
But obviously, being 12th man, you must think this could nearly be my opportunity. If it doesn't come in this test, it may come in the next one. So are you sort of kind of priming yourself for action, as it were?
A little bit, yeah, because I got 10 wickets at Headingley for Gloucestershire only a few weeks before. I felt that the Headingley game was, there was a little bit of history of horses for courses selections anyway, wasn't there, at Headingley? Martin Bicknell, Steve Watkin, people like that played there for England. So I felt that was probably my best opportunity, and that's the way it turned out.
At what point did you know you were actually playing in that match then? Was it quite late, or was it a few days you were given?
Well, therein lies a story. We were holed up at a hotel in Harrogate for a couple of days before the match. We'd been sent on a bonding session where we had to build, the type where you've got to build rafts and carry logs with teammates, that kind of thing. So all the press was saying we should have been in the nets because we'd lost at Old Trafford the previous week. You had journalists hiding in the bushes and jumping out, taking photographs of us carrying logs and things, which we had to keep an eye on. Now, I was told on the morning of the match, and I didn't know with it being my first test, I had no idea whether that was normal or whether people would be told a couple of days before or the day before. I now know what the reason was for that, and there'd been a disagreement, put it that way, between senior players and the selectors about who should fill that last spot. So it was either going to be me or Andy Caddick, and the selectors, who were David Graveney, Graham Gooch and Mike Gattin, wanted me to play, and the senior players wanted Andy Caddick. I could sense that something wasn't right. I had no idea what it was. In fact, I only found out what it was many, many years later, and had spent those many, many years thinking, what was happening? What happened there? And, it wasn't until I read, I think it was Atherton's autobiography and a couple of others, that, they revealed that there was this almighty disagreement between senior players and the selectors about who should fill that last spot. As I say, I did pick up that something was happening, not least because the day before I bowled at Michael Atherton in the nets. Before I go any further, I've got no problem with anybody, but I went into the nets to bowl at him and he slogged me all over Headingley. He teed off like it was a T20. I was disappearing into the crowd, slapped over cover, nicked over third man, that kind of thing. And he played brilliantly, to be fair, but it wasn't the way he usually plays, which left me thinking, this is a bit odd. I mean, does he bat differently for England than... Is this his test match batting rather than his county batting or whatever? Because, he was much more circumspect when you played for Lancashire, much more technically correct. But, yeah, he hammered me all over. Even good balls were disappearing back over my head. It was like that. So I knew that something was afoot. But I think that was his way of saying, I think I prefer Andy Caddick.
Was Andy Caddick still around at this point? Or had he left?
No, he was still around, I'm pretty sure. He played the previous test at Old Trafford.
Was he frosty with you?
No, not particularly. No, I mean, there were, some guys that I knew very well, or pretty well. There's no other Gloucestershire player in the team, but I knew Dean Headley and, Mark Elam and Darren Goff, Alex Stewart, they're absolutely fine.
David Lloyd, was he part of the selectors camp or the player camp, do you think?
That's a good question. I think he was probably on my side. He'd come to watch me bowl a couple of games before the test match, and I think it was at Cheltenham, and I bowled okay. So I'm not sure is the answer, but he may well have been on my side. He wasn't frosty in any way or off. He was great.
And I'm sure the irony wasn't lost on you that you went for this team building in Harrogate, and then the end result of that was this kind of odd atmosphere.
Yeah, it was. Yeah. It was a bit odd. I mean, I remember thinking this is odd, but I didn't know whether, because it was my first game, I didn't really know whether it was normal or...
Yeah, and then actually, funny enough, I watched the old BBC highlights of the test earlier on today. So you got Michael Atherton at the top. He just said it was the humid conditions. England wanted a swing bowler, gives them more variety, and you were the man.
Yeah, unfortunately, it didn't swing, though. That was the problem. I mean, I don't think it's any secret that I was heavily reliant on swing. Wasn't express pace. I'm not tall. I'm not strong. So whilst I could bowl swing, I could hit a length and a line, and I could swing the ball. If the ball doesn't swing, then you've got some major problems. It was odd because that really was the only week of the year that I didn't swing the ball. As I said earlier, it was the balls were good. They were conducive to swing bowling. So were the weather conditions up to then. But I just couldn't get it I couldn't get it swinging at the test match at all. The wicket was abrasive. The wind was buffeting, which is the enemy of the swing bowler. You really can't get into a rhythm. It was in the wrong direction as well. I'm not making excuses here. But there are reasons why swing bowling was more difficult on that day than any other day, I think. And
so just to go through this test match in order. So England batted first. Didn't do it that well. It crumbled a little bit. Jason Gillespie, you mentioned earlier, took 7 wickets, and you were one of his victims. Was he bowling pretty quickly that day?
Well, I only faced 2 balls, Graham, to be fair, but they were pretty
Did
quick.
You see either of them? Yeah.
I can't remember what happened to the first one. I don't think I hit it, put it that way. I might have left it. It might have beaten me back. But, the second one knocked my
leg stick out, and
but it goes to show their strength in depth, doesn't it? Which is when you mentioned earlier about their side. We immediately go Warren, McGrath, and then we've got someone like Gillespie taking 7 wickets. So,
and Rifle, Rifle's a quality bowler as well. I mean, Gillespie was downhill with the wind, and yes, he did bowl pretty quickly. He picked up 7 for 30 odd, was it, in that innings? And Rifle bowled up the hill. I mean, he's a big strong lad. Hits the seam. I mean, he was a quality bowler by himself. So, if Warren and McGrath didn't get you, then those two did.
And let's talk about once you did take the field and you got to have a bowl. Obviously, as you said, it wasn't swinging, but there was that key moment, wasn't there, when Australia were 50 for 3. So do you want to take us through that from your perspective?
Well, yeah, because Darren Gough and Dean Headley had opened the bowling ball really well. They were in a bit of trouble. I think they were 3 or 4 down by that stage, and Matthew Elliott was still in. And I got one to take his edge, which was nice. And it wasn't a regulation slip, because it kind of looped. It was off the kind of shoulder of the bat, and it looped. But Graham Thorpe, unfortunately, put it down. And I didn't look like taking a wicket, to be honest, after that. He went on to get 199. They ended up getting 501 declared, and we lost by an innings. It was a crucial moment, not just in the match, but in the series, I think, because the series was finely poised. And if we've got him out then, it would have been Ian Healy, and you could have brought Goughy or Dean Headley back, had a go at the tail, and I don't think they would have got anywhere near 500. I mean, we might well have got a first innings lead, and then Ponting came in as well. It was his first 100 in Test cricket as well. Whilst I bowled okay, I mean, I was nowhere near my best because the ball wasn't swinging. I think I bowled okay, but there was a time when he took a shine to me, and he pulled a ball that was just short of a length. He pulled out of the ground, and then I remember thinking, oh dear. So I pitched up the next one a little bit further, and he drove that past mid-off for 4. So you're thinking, you got really have got a sixpence here to keep him quiet, and he put on a load with Matthew Elliott.
Yeah, but no, I mean, they are fascinating. I find them fascinating, these turning points in matches and series, but not just that, more so from doing this series in players' careers, because Matthew Elliott was one of the Wisden Cricketers of the Year that year. You must have been in the conversation with all the wickets you took. If you had taken that wicket, he hadn't made 199. It's a lot of what ifs, isn't it? But
it's a sliding doors moment, isn't it? Yeah. It really is. Yeah. I mean, who knows what would have happened to him? Because he was in a stronger position than I was in terms of his position in the Australian team, but he was by no means a certainty. I'm sure he would have played a few more games after that. But yeah, I mean, if that had been caught, it would have meant a test wicket for me, which would have been nice, because I didn't end up getting one. But equally, we could have bowled them out for 200, and we've in with a decent chance in that match and that series. But
Australia ended up winning that match by an innings, as you said, because they racked up that huge score in the first innings. So going back to what you were saying earlier, then, what was the mood like after the match? How was Mike Atherton? How were the other senior players? It didn't turn into some kind of awful blame game, did it?
No, it didn't. Not at all. It didn't. We realised that they'd won that game pretty convincingly. There's no getting away from that, no hiding away. And I think it was just on to the next one at Trent Bridge, which was coming around pretty quickly. But it was just a question of, were any changes going to be made for that? And that was the change I think they made. But, I wasn't expecting to play 50 Test matches. I might have played 3 or 4 at the most. That's the kind of player I was. So I think it would have been fair to give me another go. But then again, it's in the Ashes. I didn't have a great game at Headingley. I didn't do myself justice at all. So you can understand them making the change. You can't really put anybody's career ahead of the team's prospects in an Ashes series, can you? But I just wanted to be able to show people that I could do better than I did in that match.
And how was the communication afterwards? Obviously, you went way back with Michael Atherton. Did he speak with you and say, Mike, we're probably going to go with Andy for the next test?
No, David Graveney did. He did give me a ring. I remember taking the call. It was a Gloucestershire match at Bristol, and they said the dressing room telephone had rung and it was for me. And he said, yeah, so we're not going to put you in the squad for the next match. Sorry about that. But I completely understood. you've got to take your chance, and I blame myself for that.
Now, you then went back to Gloucestershire, carried on taking wickets, and you were in the frame to be the country's leading wicket taker, weren't you? How did that pan out for the rest of the season?
Well, I know I was close, but as we got to the last match of the season, which, as fate would have it, was against Michael Atherton's Lancashire at Bristol. And it was a very close game. I think it ended up in a draw. But I remember there was me, Andy Caddick and Dougie Brown on 80 odd. I think we were all desperate to be leading wicket taker. I think I got 3 or 4 in that match. They tell me Dougie ended up bowling leg spin at Warwickshire with everybody on the boundaries so that he could get more wickets. He could end up with a leading. But I think he missed out by 1 in the end. But I was very pleased to get that. I had bowled well that year.
Okay, so just to kind of finish up the England side of things, there was a tour to West Indies that winter. Did you think you might be on that? And as a follow-up question, did you think you'd ever play for England again? And were you ever close to a call-up?
I think the honest answer again is no. I didn't think. What I did do actually was I was a question on Question of Sport.
Okay.
Darren Gough was on Question of Sport, and he was asked who was the only England player who played against Australia in the summer not to be selected for the West Indies tour. He did get it right. He said it was me. So I wasn't expecting. I think Angus Fraser went on that. I think Devon went on that. So no, I wasn't expecting to go on that. Again, it's not ideal conditions for a swing bowler. And based on how it had gone in the summer, I wasn't expecting to be picked on that trip. I think Gloucestershire then started to do well in one-day cricket. Sort of from 99 to 2004, we won a lot of trophies. And, my one-day bowling, I was pleased with how that went during that period. But, I was well past 30 by then. So I had no expectation of getting the call up. Yeah, Mark Alleyne got called up, didn't he? And Jeremy Snape got some games and did well. So they were picked, but I don't think any of the others had any serious expectation of being selected, which helped us actually, to be honest, because we kept a strong team together all year.
Well, I was going to ask, what was the secret to Gloucestershire's success? And maybe that was one of them, that you could keep a core of players together, was it?
Well, I think there was a few keys. I mean, John Bracewell came in 98, and that's when his first year as a coach. And 99 onwards is when we started to win things. I mean, our fielding unit at that is just ridiculous. I mean, at one point we had John T. Rhodes, Chris Taylor, Mark Alleyne, fantastic. Jeremy Snape was brilliant. Matt Windows was brilliant. Martin Ball was the best slip field I've ever seen. So that, I was probably the only donkey in the field, to be honest. And they used to hide me at fine leg or on the 45 behind the course, anywhere. But the other, I mean, Jack, of course, behind the stumps.
Yeah.
These were some of the best fielders in the game. And, because of that, John Bristol's a huge outfield. He kept the outfield as big as possible. So the rope went back, 100 yards both sides. And with us always confident of being the better fielding team, that saved us 30 runs in the field every single match. And then Ian Harvey came in, the king of the death bowling, just that bit of stardust in the one-day game that we needed. If he didn't get 5 or he got 100, brilliant player, the best all-round cricketer that I played with. And, that slower ball, he got so many wickets with that. He was the best in the world at it. His Yorkers were brilliant. And then John identified, some gaps. So Kim Barnett came in at the top of the order because we needed a solid opening batter. We brought Craig Spearman in. He was a fantastic player. Jeremy Snape, he filled in the middle order, that energy, the clever off spin. He could bat and field, and a bubbly personality. He filled those gaps in our team. And at the same time, the rest of us were maturing, Matt Windows, Tim Hancock, and Martin Ball, all getting to kind of optimum experience age at the same time. And it all ended up in this cocktail of success.
So many trophies, weren't there? NatWest, Benson Hedges, C&G when it wasn't the NatWest anymore. Do you have a particular favourite moment from all those cup wins? A lot of them at Lords, weren't they?
Yeah, I mean, I enjoyed the one against Glamorgan was a fantastic atmosphere. Lots of the Welsh supporters came over. The singing in the stadium was unbelievable. Obviously, what they call the cider final against Somerset,
Yeah.
that was fantastic as well. But in 2000, we won the 3 one-day competitions, all of them. I think my favourite, to be honest, was the one-day league. It wasn't a Lord's final, but we won the one-day league. When you can win, call yourself the best team, having played 16 matches home and away. That was my personal favourite to win that.
Some good celebrations after some of those Lord's wins. What were your favourite celebrations?
Well, at the time, I was studying law, and I had to do that mainly in the winter, but the exams were in the summer. So I remember a couple of times I couldn't actually go out to celebrate because I had a law exam the next day. So yeah, I had to miss out on a couple of the celebrations, but I did go on a couple. And one of the exams, we were playing Somerset at Bath Cricket Club, and I had an exam that day, and I said to John Bracewell, "Can I do this exam?" And he goes, "No, of course you can't. You've got to play against Somerset." So I said to the university, "I've got this conundrum," and they said, "Well, okay, why don't you do it at 4 a.m? It's 3 hours. You'll have finished by 7, and then you can go off and play the cricket." I said, "Well, how will that work?" He said, "Well, get your manager to invigilate." So I asked John Bracewell, I said, "Can you invigilate this exam?" And he said yes. So we got up at 3:30, finished the exam, went down to breakfast. We won the toss and batted first. I was in quite early, I think, and then Andy Caddick nipped one back and broke my leg. So it missed the pad, that bit by your knee where the pad doesn't cover.
Yeah.
And it just nipped it back and hit me on the side of the knee. And I went down like a sack of potatoes and a broken leg. So didn't play for a few weeks after that.
And of all people, it was Andy Caddick, of all people.
Yeah, that's right.
Wow. What goes around comes around, eh?
Yeah, absolutely. It hit me, and then the next ball I fended one off to gully and got caught. So I hobbled off. But he didn't realise he'd broken my leg at that point. But, a week later, it was still not right. So I went to have it x-rayed, and they said, yeah, it's broken.
Yeah. And when you did decide to call time on your career, was that a difficult decision, or were you ready to stop?
No, I mean, it chose me rather than anything else because...
With injuries, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, my back was pretty knackered. I mean, and Jack retired the same year, and I remember we both went for a back scan and we were comparing results. I mean, his looked horrendous. It just looked... His looked far worse than mine. I mean, he'd been bending up and down, as he used to say, 600 times a day, every day for 20 years. That's what he used to do. We both knew that this would be our last year, 2004. So we both said, we better call it a day. We've had our time.
Just on Jack Russell, what were your thoughts? I mean, when you were playing in that 1997 Ashes, did you think he should have still been the England wicketkeeper?
Jack was an absolutely phenomenal keeper. He went a whole season without conceding a bye once at Gloucestershire in all cricket. He was our heartbeat, our talisman. He kept us all going. He was our brains as well because he would work out ways to get people out. He never let anybody down. He gave absolutely 100% in every game. And if you weren't giving 100%, he'd tell you pretty quickly. He was just an awesome cricketer. I remember when he started standing up to the stumps, didn't he, to me and John Lewis. And I remember we were at Scarborough in 2001, I think. He just started doing it after that. And he said, well, I'm going to do this. I'm going to stand up to you today at Scarborough. I said, okay. He said, I want to practice it before the match starts. So he said, in practice, come steaming down the slope at Scarborough and bowl as fast as you can. And I'm standing up to the stumps. So I did that. And one kicked off a length and hit him straight in the eye. And he went off to hospital and he had, goodness knows how many stitches in his head, maybe 10 stitches in his head. He missed the game. Mark Lane had to keep wicket. But I remember he came back and said, still think it's a good idea. And, no helmet or anything back in those days. No. He just had his sunglasses on. And he went on to do it brilliant. And that made a huge difference to us, him standing up to the stumps.
Was he the most dedicated cricketer you came across in your career?
Yeah, absolutely. He would leave no stone unturned. He'd absolutely model professional. Gloucestershire through and through, had no interest at all in playing for anybody else apart from Gloucestershire. And, a fantastic gloveman. I mean, I watched some of the finals back, and he'd take balls that go between a batsman's bat and pad, and then he'd just melt into his gloves and he'd just throw it away to cover as if nothing had happened. And he was just, he was so popular as well. I mean, John Bracewell loved him, of course, for what he gave us, and the rest of the players, we loved him as well. He was a phenomenal person to have in the dressing room, and a world-class keeper.
What about his work of art? Do you have any of that hanging on your walls?
Yeah. I gave him one when I retired, actually. Because our retirements were coincided. I did see quite a lot of him on the physio's bench. He was kind of a take it in turns on the physio's couch for most of that 2004 year. So at the end, he said he sent me one of his pictures and signed it. Happy retirement. It was a pleasure.
What's it a picture of?
It's a picture of Cheltenham College, where we had so many good days.
Brilliant. Excellent. And the final question I was going to ask was just about the ECB night in 2017 that Andrew Strauss organised to kind of give everyone a cap. How special was that? And did you really appreciate that gesture from Strauss and the ECB? Yeah,
absolutely did. It was a brilliant occasion. I mean, I think they had given some thought to the seating plan as well, because you're gonna guess who I sat next to.
Go on.
I was sat next to Michael Atherton.
Yeah, there you go.
Which was great. I mean, it really was, and we had a good chat and reminisced about. In fact, I think he wrote an article in the Times the day after about how mine and his career had overlapped and coincided.
Yeah, hugely.
That kind of thing, and that was a really nice article.
Did you mention 97 and the Caddick and the frosty atmosphere and the slogging in the nets?
No, I didn't. As I said, I got no problem with if he thinks Andy Caddick is a better option than me, he's right, isn't he? Let's be honest. So I've got no problem with that at all. It was great to sit next to him and chat to him. I see him every now and again, knocking around the circuit. Mark Hylott was on another left arm, was on the other side. So I think they'd given some
put some thought into it. Oh, that's good.
Seating plan, which was good. But it was a wonderful occasion. Yeah, I mean, full credit to Straussy for organising it. We all loved it.
Yeah. And then final question: what did it mean to you to play for England, and for this podcast, what did it mean to you to play in the Ashes?
Well, it was, I just felt at the time that, I was bowling well enough to deserve a selection, for the few years before that, and particularly in 97. So it's just something that can't be taken away. I mean, regardless of how well it goes or how badly it goes. And in my case, it didn't go well, and I didn't do myself justice. I still look back on it with a lot of fondness, and can say that I played one game for England, and played in the Ashes as well. I wish it had gone better. It's fascinating to look back on. It was a fantastic experience to go through.
And a fantastic experience to spend time with Mike Smith. Thanks so much to him for taking us through his life and times. Mike referenced the article Mike Atherton wrote in the Times following the ECB night in 2017 to celebrate all of England's Test cricketers. Let's finish this episode with an extract from that article. As it happens, I sat next to the player in the room that I'd known the longest, ever since we played against each other in a Lancashire under-13s versus Yorkshire under-13s match at Old Trafford in 1980, Mike Smith, the left-arm swing bowler. He played once for England under my captaincy, had a catch dropped in his first spell, didn't take a wicket, and never played again. There were many such stories like that on Tuesday night, the ups and downs of sport, good luck and bad, what was and what might have been. The words of Mike Atherton there from that Times article from 2017. I think you'll agree that just about sums it up. I'm glad there were no hard feelings after the Tonkin Athers gave Mike in the nets at Headingley. And that brings us to the close of play for another episode, but we'll be back out in the middle soon enough for more tales from the Ashes annals. I do hope you'll join me. Until then, I've been Graham Barrett, and this has been Once Upon a Time in the Ashes.